Hey, this is William Gill. I usually take pictures of trains at night, but I got Woodrow the Adventure Dog here, and today we're at the very end of the tracks in Troy on Adams Street, and we're gonna follow them down to where they hook into the rest of the system, somewhere down in Rensselaer. I've walked along the tracks in Troy a lot, so I'll share what I know up on this end, and when we get to the part what we don't know, that's gonna be the adventure. 4 railroads came into Troy, and in 1845, the Troy and Greenbush came up this route along the riverfront into downtown. And after about 5 years, they rerouted themselves to a station a little inland to make more room. So since then, this has been the north end of this line. It became the New York Central. Over here, there was an old roundhouse, probably so when the trains got to the end of the track here, they could turn around the steam locomotives. And by the 1950s, probably a little bit earlier, it was gone. Along this here is my favorite building along the tracks, the New York Central Freight House. It was originally started down there on Adams Street, and then they extended it for a whole block. The original end's been demolished, but they still use this end, not the railroad, but a private trucking company uses it to unload boxcars. There's not any there today, though. Behind Woodrow here, behind the freight house, was Troy Cold Storage, and it's gone now. It was demolished about 15 years ago. But between 1885 and 1900, they cleared out the whole area behind this. They left one bell foundry, which was a big business in Troy. And they built a refrigerated warehouse and ran tracks right into it. So across the tracks from the freight house and the cold storage used to be a canal boat basin along the river. In the 1860s, John Griswold and Erastus Corning built a rolling mill here that made rails, iron rails, and then steel rails. And just like the freight house, this site over here still gets freight service. It's American rock salt. Road salt comes in on all these hopper cars here. So this is the Post and Kill. This used to be another railroad bridge that went to the other side of the freight house. And way up in there is Empire Stove Works. Later Lindy's Hardware, and then the Irish Mist restaurant. But they made coal stoves there, cast iron coal stoves, and that was a huge business in Troy. Troy made everything cast iron, but the stoves were really important because they changed how you could build buildings. They let you put a stove in every room instead of having fireplaces. We're going to cut around through here and check out the Troy Union Railroad. So this other line over here where this hopper is sitting is where they built the new tracks, I mean new in like the 1850s, into downtown Troy. So in Troy, there's this diagonal scar where these tracks went into downtown away from the riverfront. Today they stop here at this bridge. So since this was the start of the Troy Union, I think that's why there's this old railroad telephone booth here. So that's pretty cool. This thing has to be ancient. So this used to be this grocer wholesaler. You can see there was a full height door so they could roll boxcars in here. I think this building is compared to the other ironworks and everything, pretty new. 20s or 30s maybe? So right behind me was Vulcan Ironworks, and that was Troy's first iron rolling mill, and they later combined with the Rensselaer Ironworks on the other side of the Post and Kill, and all became Ludlow valve. And like the ones on the north side of the canal, this burned down, but this burned down in the early 2000s. So this over here is Interstate Commodities, and it was built on a vacant lot in the 1940s, and for the whole time until about 5 years ago, got a couple of grain cars a week. This is where they used to unload grain and put it up in the silos, and then they would load it into trucks, you know, to supply farms and stuff. And this is what they used to kick grain cars around the property. Somewhere I have a video of them working with it, and I'll share a link to that. Across from Interstate Commodities, and much earlier, the 1840s, was Clinton Stove Works, and everything's gone from it, just about. But they built this huge, by Troy standards, 5-6 story stove factory, coal stove factory, like the other one, Empire, up there, but this was bigger. And they could load on the railroad. They had access to the river on the other side of the property. After that, it became a warehouse. This other company, Bruno Machine, and now this quarry owns it, and they use it to work on their trucks. So still an industrial site. So here we are at Monroe Street, down at the south end of Interstate Commodities, and maybe this crossing has some clues for us. 5.6 miles to go. So over here is the start of Burden Ironworks, and we're gonna just talk about Burden Ironworks almost for like a mile. So right here, tracks used to go into the ironworks and later the steel plant that was down there. All right, looks like I lied a little bit. On this side of the tracks is not Burden Ironworks. So over here is a warehouse. This used to be a refractory brick company, and maybe this is the building. It looks kind of new, but you can see there used to be loading bays here, so it's something railroad related. And down here is a textile company. Most of the textile companies in Troy were up on the north side, and the ironwork was on the south side, but this is a little bit of an outlier. So these guys recycled cotton waste and wool waste, you know, waste from other mills, and they broke it up with chemicals, kind of like how you make paper, and busted all the fibers up and created sort of like a felt called shoddy. And everyone calls this the fortress, but it was really just built as a textile company. And later, like so many things, it became a warehouse, and that's when they added these loading bays onto it to get sort of building supplies and that kind of thing. So over here is one of these many industrial lots that used to be one thing and then another and then another. For a while this was a scrapyard. You can see there used to be where the tracks used to go in here. And then it was a coal dealer, lots of coal dealers in Troy. And now it's a metal fabricators. Where'd he go, Woodrow? Over on the other side of us is back to Burden Ironworks. And this huge open area used to be where all the incoming and outgoing rail cars were parked. And it's all high because there used to be a mountain of slag there that got knocked down. But they would take all the, impurities from the steel and process waste and dump slag in there. Some places, they take that slag and grind it up or shatter it by dumping it into water, and they'd make cinder blocks out of it. That's sort of where they came from. So behind me is School 12, and a public school in Troy, and it's hard to imagine being a student there, because on the other side of you would have been Burden Ironworks, which employed about 2,000 people, and they were constantly hauling raw materials up into the blast furnace and dumping it in, and constantly taking steel and slag, pouring it out the bottom and carting it around and working on it. They had their own railroad to move things around. It must have been loud and exciting, but also pretty oppressive. This constant noise, all this soot raining back down on Troy. There is no doubt why people tried to get as far away from this industry as possible as soon as they could. So you can tell this is an old industrial building. Look at that roof. Loading bays. It's listed as on the Sanborn map as built as a warehouse for rail to truck transfer. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But today it's a charter school. So over here is the Burden building, and it's built in the 1880s, and it's one of the first examples of a office building getting pulled out of the factory itself and sort of having this separate space for managers and clerks and that kind of thing. And right alongside it here is their ladle car that took slag out of the blast furnaces and used it to dump up on the north end that I was talking about before. Republic Steel picked up Burden Iron in the 40s, and then it closed down by the early 70s. That building, the headquarters, has been in the hands of a preservation organization since. But this over here, this giant steel, or this giant concrete wall, they call it the Alamo, but it was just a giant dam around an oil tank. I think Niagara Mohawk, the gas company here, bought the Coke Works, and we're gonna go explore that place in a little bit. Bought them, and I think they're making synthetic gas there because there's all these oil tanks, and I don't know what else they'd be doing with that. But here's what's gonna happen here. I'm gonna take a little break from the tracks and follow this line out to the horseshoe warehouses for the Burden Company. So Burden got rich building horseshoes, or at least he got his start that way. Before his invention of a machine to make them, you had to have a blacksmith individually make each one. So he made this machine just in time for the Civil War that just cranked them out and totally changed things. I'd bet this held more than just horseshoes, of course. Probably barrels of railroad spikes, nails. Burden invented the machine that made railroad spikes. Before he got involved, blacksmiths had to make those by hand too. Hang on, dog. Yeah, let's go down here. Come on. Come on. Good boy, go. You can see hardware where they used to be able to open the windows up top. This is a little scary. What do you think, Woodrow? Hey, come on, dog. All right. You want to bail out. Look at this wall collapsing here. This side's already collapsed. But you can see it's a pretty big complex down here. And this is really most of what's left of Burden's buildings. Come on, Woodrow. Keep going. Come on, this way. Go. Go. Good boy. Good boy. So you can't really make it out very well, but over here there's a bunch of railroad bridges. Burden's furnaces and everything were down there, and the horseshoe warehouses. And on this side of the creek was their coke works, where they made the coke for the blast furnaces, which is, you kind of, it's like, you know, charcoal. Well, coke is the same thing, only you start with coal. So upstream was Burden's first ironworks, and they were powered by water. And then these lower works here were the steam works. So you got to start up there and then migrated down to the flat section to build the bigger steam works. So this whole area, the coke works, got demolished probably about 15 years ago for environmental remediation. But there used to be a lot of conveyors and a whole bunch of buildings. Later, Niagara Mohawk owned it, and I think they made both coke for their power plants and other places, and probably synthetic gas, which is you sort of vaporize oil or coal and pump that around. I can't figure out what else they'd be doing with all the old tanks that were down here. And there was this big gas holder up here, a steel one, and it had a winking eye tank on it. And later that was this whole area was owned by King Fuels, and they were just an oil company, and so they kind of filled up the space with all their equipment. But now it's flat. All right, we're back to the tracks, and you can't really see it, but where? Up there. Well, you can't see it. Let's go check it out. Come on, Woodrow. All right, so up over this way was Erastus Corning's rolling mill, the Albany Ironworks. Even though we're in Troy, he's from Albany. He was the mayor of Albany. He convinced the state legislature at one point to allow corporate mergers between railroads, and strung together all these little railroads, and that became the New York Central. And that's the track that's out behind us. Anyway, so the tracks that went over us here, up to the top of that hill, went to his rolling mill. They rolled, apparently, the plates for the USS Monitor there. They made rivets there, and later they specialized in railroad parts, and they made spikes, joint bars, and it got combined into a company, Portec, that made you know, all kinds of railroad fittings, and that place was open until the late 80s, and they had a furnace going and everything there still. Now it's a trash transfer station, and most of the old buildings have kind of fallen apart or been destroyed. So this is the last industry I know about in Troy, Chevron Asphalt. And let's see, if we get around like this, maybe you can see buried in the street here, there's the start of their spur, and it comes across. Here it is. So these guys, well, as their name says, did asphalt. Here's the way into their plant here. This all got demolished and remediated. Anything like coal tar, asphalt, oil. A lot of the furnaces around here were converted to electric, so they had PCBs. So all that's been remediated, and usually they just tear down the buildings to get to the soil. But you can see here, this is where their railroad spur used to be. And in here was these pretty cool, these tanks that were jacketed with these silver wrappings. So that's pretty cool. But you can still see there was industry here. Here's the remains of the railroad spur where they got their asphalt. This is the reason Troy's where it is. There was the Post and Kill and the Wines Kill with water for power, and they all got dammed up for miles, backing up into the county so they could provide reliable power. And then there's the Hudson here that provides flat tidal access back down to New York City, 150 miles away. So this was a great place to do industry early on, but later, as access to coal and steel moved west, everything moved that way. So even by 1900, the future was somewhere else. All right, here, the road we've been following goes one way, and the tracks go the other. So I guess it's time to leave the road, follow the tracks. For being a very quiet little branch now, I'm surprised how open this still is down here. But I think this used to be 3 or 4 track main line through here. Very busy, so I guess they still have plenty of space. And they keep it open. Usually it's like a wall of trees. Now, the road we were on before goes to the sewer plant. And while we've left that road, there's the sewer plant right over there. Still at the sewer plant, but some indication as to where we might be. We started at 5.6. Now we're at 3. What do you think, Woodrow? Yeah, let's leave those geese alone. Come on. Leave it. Leave it, Woodrow. Good boy. Yeah, leave it alone. So check it out. Back behind me there's the Troy Industrial that we've been following. And if I come around a little bit more, here's an old spur. I think that used to go into the sewer plant. Maybe they took away sludge or something that way. Let's see. Well, connection's broken now. Woodrow, stay. All right, well, it started to rain, so off with this, on with a raincoat. All right, we're off. All right, so it's raining and I'm just trying to close as much distance as possible here so I don't get too soaked, but it's all right. So if you followed this far, like what's going on, you can leave me a note. If there's somewhere else I should explore, Woodrow and I will give it a try. Any other rail lines. This is what I do when I'm making my trains at nights photos. I spend a huge amount of time just exploring the railroad landscape to come up with ideas about how to represent it. So I'm up for exploring almost anywhere. And if you want to be alerted next time I post something, you know, like or follow or whatever they tell you to do on YouTube. All right, Woodrow and I climbed down here to check this out. Originally, this is like a 2-track culvert with a round top, bricks. That's pretty neat. And then on both ends, they added this rectangular section here. And look at this. This rail is like 30 pounds maybe? It's really old. That's cool. Back through the jungle, Woodrow. Up, 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 up. Good boy. Woodrow, do you like the jungle? I don't think he likes the jungle. Mile 2. It's really raining. See this right here? There's 2 sections of rail and it's joined with this join bar here. That's what they were making at the Albany Ironworks in Troy. And these offset head railroad spikes, you know, it's got a lot more head on this side than this side. That's what Henry Burden invented, a machine to make these. You see these rails are in like 39-foot sections. And they're joined every, you know, everyone has a joint and it's bolted together. Now track is welded, so that clickety-clack sound is the wheels going over this stuff. And it's, you know, what we think of trains, even though it's getting more and more uncommon. Clickety-clack. Woodrow and I are thoroughly soaked. But it looks like we're coming back to civilization here. I see a gate up ahead. I saw a white car driving around. Hopefully it's not the Amtrak police. Because we're not going to escape through this stupid swamp if they come up here. I keep hearing the cars on the highway bridge behind me. And even though we've walked the whole length of the tracks and there's no trains up there, it always scares the crap out of me. After 3 miles, I think we've come back to an industrial area, this time in Rensselaer. Some of these buildings look kind of new, but some of these over here, you know, these loading bays look pretty old. Like, there used to be tracks in here, and something got unloaded and offloaded. Anybody know what this place is? We're going to be walking along it for a while, so you can think about it. Maybe an oil dealer or something? Kind of has that look. Something. I can see the tracks buried in there. And we just want to make sure I don't get stuck between 2 fences. But we're still doing okay over on that side. I like where we're walking a lot right here. Check out that old barn. Really cool. Right along the tracks here. Well, we've come to the end of the Troy Industrial, but not to milepost 0. I think we're gonna get to this red light here, and I think that's probably as far as we can go. This way goes to New York, that way goes over the Hudson, and then all the way to Buffalo and Chicago and the water level route.